Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Capes and Lunatics. I am Phil. Lilith is here, and we have another guest, a returning guest, the great. We always love talking to him, Mr. J.M. DeMatteis. Hello, sir.
Hey, how are you?
Good. This time we are talking Spider-Man: Shadow of the Green Goblin #1 that just came out. So I'm assuming these miniseries are selling very well because this is like the third one recently.
This is the third one that I've done over the course of the past, I guess, year and a half, 2 years at most.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they must be doing, and I know they've had other writers doing like creators of the 90s doing stuff from the 90s and stuff. So these must be doing well.
I assume so, or they wouldn't keep doing them, right? Because it all comes down to the bottom line in the end, you know?
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I love when I see, oh yeah, J.M. DeMatteis has a new Spider-Man miniseries like this coming on. I'm like, yes. Because even like back in the day, like in the 90s, didn't they, wasn't the plan for like Spider-Man: The Lost Years to be more than like a 3-issue miniseries?
Yes, the original plan was that The Lost Years was going to be a series of miniseries because Ben was gone for 5 years.
Oh yeah.
So that 5 years in like Marvel time, which would have been like really, 20 years had gone by since that original Clone Saga. So it was a lot of stories that we could have told. I was really disappointed when that plan got scuttled because there were so many great Ben stories to tell. One of the reasons why I was so happy to come back and do that Ben Reilly Spider-Man series to get my claws into that character again, because I love Ben. He's a fantastic, deep, complex, interesting character.
Yeah, I love your Ben stuff, and like even that miniseries is when he was Spider-Man. I was almost hoping when they first announced it, I'm like, oh, I wanted to, maybe to see what he would have done with The Lost Years if they had kept that going.
Yeah, I will do anything with Ben anytime. I've told them that. That's on the record. They know.
So with like these ones, because I mean, this one is not even set in the 90s stuff. It's set like back during the first couple, the first few weeks of Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man. Do they come to you, or do you say, oh, I have an idea for,
I'm trying to remember how this one came about, because I've had a great relationship with Danny Chasm, the editor. We had a great time on the first 2 miniseries. So we want to keep working together. So it just became kind of, what's the next one? What do we want to do next? And like my first thing has always been, but they didn't want to do Ben, maybe because of what's going on in current continuity with him or something. So I thought it would be interesting to go back to the real early days. I'd done a couple of shorter stories, maybe about 10 years ago, in Amazing Spider-Man Family, if you remember that anthology book, that took place really early on. And in fact, even in the 90s, I did a story in one of the anniversary issues that took place literally the morning after Uncle Ben's murder. I plotted it and Stan Lee dialogued, which was like a real thrill, to say the least. So it's an area that's really interesting to me, because we forget, we think Spider-Man, he was Spider 15-year-old kid is what he was, and think about yourself at 15. Imagine yourself in that and imagine yourself in that position. And how do you handle any of this? How do you even understand what's happening to you? One of the stories that we did in Amazing Spider-Man Family, which plays into this story, and I think when they collect it, it will be reprinted in that same collection, was a story called The Punch, where he goes to stop a robbery just at a local grocery store. And he doesn't understand his strength yet. So, this guy's robbing a grocery store. One punch, the guy goes flying across the store. He's got broken ribs, broken leg, broken arm. And Peter's horrified. So that's one of the things that's just on a simple level, not to mention the emotional and psychological levels of everything he has to deal with. But how do you control your strength? If I suddenly had that incredible strength, any of us, chances are the first time that you got into a brawl with somebody, there's a good chance you'd kill them because you've never had that level of power before. So that alone is interesting. But of course, there's so much more to explore there than just the strength issue.
Oh yeah, there's so much. I mean, just reading this, I mean, you bring it home because it's like just the death of his uncle, the murder of his uncle, that would be enough that, you should go to
therapy. Well, that's one of the big things that's going on in the story, is that it's only been at most a month since Uncle Ben has died. And he and May are not processing it. They're not talking to each other about it. We explore this more and more as the series goes on. May's mentality, I think, has always been to just, she's trying to keep it inside for him. He's trying to be happy, funny, jokey Peter for her, and neither one of them is processing their grief. Not to mention, for Peter, that whole other level of guilt as well. It's not just grief; it's guilt, and so there's so much to play with them there. And then when you open the can of worms that is the Osborne family,
which
there's
you love
there,
to do.
yes, so much dysfunction and misery there.
Oh.
That and again, to go into that early period, he's not the Green Goblin yet, but he's certainly on that path. And Harry's not the Harry that we know, and Gwen shows up, and we have some of her family drama that's going on with her mother dying, and there's just a lot to explore there, So it was refreshing. Plus the thing, and I did this once before in a story where I did a story in Web Spinners years ago, which was also looking at a particular period of Spider-Man history, but the important thing for me in a story is often the narrative voice. Who's telling the story? Is it a omniscient narrator? Is it a third character who's not directly involved in it? Well, what I'm doing in this is Peter, in my mind, many, many, many years later. In my mind, he's not even Spider-Man anymore. You know, he's got a wife, he's got kids, he's doing. If I only just figured out the other day what he's doing, but I don't want to say, but I know what he's doing. And so he's looking back at these events with the wisdom and the distance of time. And that gives you a completely different narrative door into the story than if you were telling it from Peter's point of view as it was happening then. And I find that very interesting because it becomes a kind of a juxtaposition of the events and how Peter feels then, and then this older, wiser person looking back on these events with a very different perspective.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, just the deep dives you always do are great, and then we're getting a new villain.
Yeah, I was
not new, not new.
Oh well,
that's the thing. I had no idea this character existed, and we were talking about exploring this whole period and the Osborns and everything. And Danny said to me, "Well, do you remember this villain from this -1 issue of Spider-Man in the '90s that Howard Mackie wrote?" And I don't think I ever read it at the time. So the character, I read the story and I thought, oh, this will fit just perfectly with what we want to do. So this is the proto-goblin. So we brought him back for this story too. And, you know, the theme of family runs through all of it. It's the Osborn family. It's the Parker family. It's the Stacy family. And the proto-goblin has a whole issue because he can't get back to his family. So it's really about family and parents and children and grief and dysfunction and all the things I love to write about.
I think what I enjoyed most was the daily life stuff of Peter, because I feel like in modern comics we just don't do that. It's just, you know, all Spider-Man all the time, and I think it's really important, especially for this time, to just be able to sit with him and what he's going through and just really get that perspective, because I feel like it is lost on people a lot because his name is Spider-Man, not Spider-Boy, because he was just a boy, really. And he had already gone through losing his parents, and now this happens and they can't pay the bills and all these things, and
that's the classic Spider-Man stuff, right? That's what made the character so great and so interesting. You know, I always say, and I think any writer who ever wrote Spider-Man will say, the book isn't about Spider-Man, whether he's got a mask on or not. The book is about Peter Parker. Peter Parker happens to be wearing a mask and web swinging around, but it's not like, I'm Batman. You know what I mean? It's always Peter Parker. It's always that same flawed, interesting, heartfelt screw up, you know.
Oh yeah, and again, he's this area, he's a 15-year-old boy, but meanwhile, the world sees the mask, so they think he's a grown man, and half the world doesn't trust him and think he's up to something, you know, shady. So it's like, yeah, that is a ton of pressure for anyone, but especially this kid.
Yeah, and then, you know, we're talking about, you know, so Uncle Ben is gone. They have all these bills piling up, and he had before Uncle Ben's murder some sort of career as Spider-Man where he was making money, and so he wants to go back and do that. And he finds out now that because the Bugle has been ranting and raving about the Spider-Man menace, he can't get a job. So he ends up getting $100 for doing a kid's birthday party, which may be my favorite scene in the whole book. I really enjoyed writing that. That was really fun.
And then is there ever like a temptation to like modernize some of this, like, you know, you got to add the, like, you know, cell phones or
well, you know, we talk about that, and I think that would ruin things. You don't want to. I think there might be at one point. No, I don't think. I thought there was a scene where we saw one, because really, if you look at it, when you have to keep moving the Marvel continuity,
like the slide.
You know, if Peter is like 25 years old or 28 years old or whatever in the current books, I don't know how old they think he is in the current books, but even if you go back 10 or 15 years, we're still in the world of a technology that didn't exist when those original stories were written. So we just decide to kind of sidestep all that, you know. You know, so
my only thing is like Gwen maybe says calling the cops or something, and it might have like a phone or something, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that might be the only time in the whole series we see anything like that.
Okay. So yeah, I was gonna say that must be one of the hardest things, is just deciding, okay, we have to kind of slide the time. So
yeah, so you have to kind of make it feel timeless, you know. Right, but the truth is, you know, to slide the time, then Peter's growing up in an age of the internet and cell phones and all of this nonsense.
And then, I mean, a lot of that would change the tone of some of this, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, if you really leaned into that, it's like, you know, so many people said, you know, you watch TV shows from the pre-cell phone age, and how many plots would be completely upended by having a cell phone, you know?
And the art is great on this too. I mean,
yes.
Did you get to choose him, or did they pair you with him?
They paired me with him. Michael St. Maria is his name, and really, he's new as far as I know.
Up and coming, yeah.
Excellent artist, and also an artist who really listens to feedback and really works hard and is, you know, really working on his craft, doing some beautiful work. And, you know, that's just the first issue. I'm watching him get better each issue.
Wow.
You know, so if you like the first issue, wait till you get to like issues 2 and 3. He's really, really excellent. It's always nice. I have so many great artists that I've worked with over the years, and I want to keep working with over and over and over again. And yet it's nice to work with new people too, and see the new talent coming in and interact with them. So it's been a delight working with him.
Does that give you a fresh perspective of like how you describe things or anything like that? Because when you work with some certain people, you kind of get into that rhythm. They kind of know your shorthand.
Yeah. Well, that's true. You know, it's not so much that because since I didn't know anything about his style or work beyond a few samples when I started writing, so I'm not adjusting my writing. What happens is I believe that the story is the most important thing. So I'm not going to adjust my story to suit an artist's style necessarily. You know, if it's an artist that I'm working intimately with and they say, I want to draw a scene at the beach, yeah, I'll throw in a scene at the beach or whatever. But what does happen when you work with someone after a while, like if Michael and I were working on an ongoing series, his style is now imprinted in my brain. So as I'm writing those stories, you know, I'm very visual. So I'm visualizing this stuff as I'm writing it. The more you work with an artist, the more you're visualizing the story in their style anyway. So it's not so much that I'm consciously tailoring a story to them as that their style becomes part of my consciousness and kind of flows into the story that way. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Okay, good. I hope I wasn't sure if I was clear about that.
I mean, God, how many artists have you worked with over the years? There's so many.
Yeah, I've been really lucky because so many of them have been great, you know, not just good, but great. Every once in a while I take a step back and I think about all the guys I've worked with, you know, even at the very, very beginning of my career, as I'm just kind of setting foot in the business, you've got guys like John Buscema, Gene Colan, Gil Kane, Don Heck, Steve Ditko. These guys were still working. And at some point I did stories with all of them.
Wow.
You know, some of them were just, you know, 8-page stories for the DC anthology books when I was just starting out, but still, you know, what a thrill to kind of just put your foot in the door and work with these guys who to me were like gods, you know?
Oh yeah. And then like, again, like your legendary runs, I mean, aren't they collecting your Justice League run in an omnibus now?
The third omnibus is coming. I got my copies last week, but I think it'll be out some point in May, I think. Yeah. Another massive 1,000 pages or so that wraps up basically, you know, all of our stuff as well as a bunch of other Justice League stories from that era. Yeah.
And then I saw, I mean, speaking of DC side, there's another upcoming. You're doing the Death in the Family, the Robin Lives.
With Rick Leonardi. Yeah. That's it's looking at that classic story where Jason Todd died, and just asking that basic question: what if he lived? What would have happened after that? So we're doing a 4-issue miniseries that explores that. And I haven't worked on Batman in a while, so it's really fun to get back into the Bat universe. And this is another story that, with all the action and everything, is really about what's going on in everyone's head and dealing with this incredibly traumatic event. And what is Jason going through? For that matter, what is the Joker going through? What is and certainly if you're Batman and you're the guy that brought this kid into this world in the first place, what are you going through? So I'm about to start writing the 3rd issue next week. So I'm pretty deep into it now. And it's been really, really fun. Really fun.
Is that like another 4-issue or?
Yeah, this one's 4 issues. Yeah. And I think it'll be out in July.
Okay.
Ooh.
So are those like the most fun, where like the Elseworlds or the What Ifs, because it's like you don't have to worry about, okay, I have to lead the character a certain way for other teams in a certain month, for Elseworlds and stuff. It's like, oh, you can pretty much do whatever you want.
Right. This one, yeah, it really is, because I can take these characters now anywhere I want them to be. If Batman decides by the 4th issue that he wants to join a rock and roll band and go on tour, which is not what's going to happen, but if he does, and it flows naturally from the story, so you can do things that normally, when you're in continuity, you got to leave things for the next guy to come in, and there has to be a certain status quo that's there. But something like this, you can bend and twist things in different ways.
And there's a certain suspense to it too, because with Elseworlds, it's like, well, no one's. There's no guarantee everyone's safe. Batman could be dead at the end of this.
Yeah, it's true.
Sorry, I felt like I interrupted, Lil.
No, you're okay. Just to swing it back to Shadow of the Green Goblin, there were a couple of variants. Was there any variant particular that tickled your fancy?
It's funny.
Or are you into variants or not?
I don't. Where I see the variants, I see them online, because they don't send me the variants. They just send me the copy of the main cover. And there was one that I saw online. I don't know who did it. It's the back of Norman Osborn's head filled with little pumpkins, and the Green Goblin kind of crawling out of the back of his head. I don't know if that's a variant for the first issue.
I see that one. Yeah.
That one, I mean, they were all beautiful. I mean, the covers are all beautiful, but that one I thought was so creative and so weird and so interesting.
I mean, even the regular cover, I love. I mean, I just love with.
Oh yeah, that's a great cover.
I just love miniseries like this, where they do they'll do the little touches, like the corner box of the era, whatever era it's supposed to be, and stuff.
Yeah. That's all Danny. He when we did the Ben Reilly stuff, he went for the 90s look on the covers, so I think it is a nice touch. It's a really nice touch.
But tell Danny we want more miniseries from you for Spider-Man stuff.
We're already starting work on another one after this. I can't.
Oh, really?
I haven't started. We're in the working it out stage, but there will be another one after this. Very, very different. That's all I can say, is it'll be very, very different from the other ones that we've done.
Oh, okay. So we're kind of getting back to that lost year stuff, or are we going to get a series of miniseries from you about? Again, just do like a Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, just like a Spider-Man in different eras.
Well, that's what years ago, if you remember the Web Spinners book, that's what it was supposed to be, and that's why I guess what it was for a while. It didn't last. It's a shame, because it was a great book. I wrote the first arc for it, and in fact, if I remember, Ralph Macchio and I, the editor, were the ones that came up with the idea of basically, let's do a Spidey version of Legends of the Dark Knight. I would love to see an ongoing series like that, where different creators can come on and just tell their Spider-Man story. That would actually be, but I guess, it seems to me, this is from the commercial standpoint, that these books tend to do better when they do the miniseries. Like, the more of an ongoing series it is, I think the more the sales drop off. So it probably serves them to do a bunch of miniseries, as opposed to, here's the book where you can jump in and find Spider-Man in all these different eras.
Yeah, because again, we're in the era of they kind of renumber when a new creative team comes on.
Right.
So is that the thinking, that higher numbers kind of scare off new readers, or?
I'm just, I know as much as you really. I don't have all the behind the scenes info, but it sure seems like that. It seems like rebooting with a number one makes a big difference. Just as like the miniseries were 5 issues. Now they're 4. They must have looked at sales and And I know back when they were 6 issues, I remember when people were like, oh, it always really drops off by the 6 issues. So now all our miniseries are 5 issues. So they're always adjusting. They're always adjusting because much as we hate to admit it, it's a business and they have to make a profit.
Yes.
I don't think about that part, but they have to think about that part.
Oh,
Yeah.
Daryl was a nice touch, by the way. It's like I still keep in touch with Daryl in the story when you talk about Daryl.
Right, but that's also we're
a
having
little
that distance, where he's older. He, they can bring those little touches into the story that if it was happening in the present moment, you couldn't do that.
That was a great page too.
Oh yeah, that was a beautiful page, and the expression he got on that kid's face was just fantastic.
Oh, it's wow. Well, again, too, that's also kind of just like these are just 2 children. It's not. But I'm sure Dale sees him as a man. But again, it's just 2 children having it.
Right, right. Maybe there's 5 years difference between them, right?
Yeah.
He looks like he's maybe like 10 years old or something.
And I really feel for the quote unquote villain too. Poor Proto Goblin, honestly.
Yeah, he is a tragic figure because he didn't. It's the classic. I didn't ask for this character. I didn't ask for this. Well, look what happened to me.
But I love I love the character even more now because I love when like you and other writers do this where it's like, yeah, remember this one guy who showed up once like years ago? Yeah, he's back. Well, let's flesh out.
What we did with Spider-Side in the Ben Reilly series.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, and I've said this before, but I used him specifically because I never liked the character. Mainly because we never got a chance. None of the writers ever got a chance to really develop him. So he just was just one of these characters that felt like he was injected into the story. And what is he doing here? So the Ben Reilly series gave me a chance to really dig deep and build him into a substantial character that I hope people now can use and reuse if they choose to, because he's interesting now.
Yeah, that's why I would like an anthology or something like to explore these characters. I mean, they gave you some time to explore Kane and stuff. Yeah, like Spider-Side just seemed like a gimmick because we really didn't get any backstory about him.
Yeah. I always say there's no such thing as a bad character. You can take any character, and if you can dig into their psyches in the right way, you can turn them into a really strong character. They may not resonate and go on to become iconic characters, but they'll be interesting and you'll want to read about them.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, it's like Venom could have dropped off, but again, in the 90s they gave him so many miniseries and stuff, so they kind of took the time to give him more and more backstory.
Right.
Okay, so is Norman or any of the goblins like your favorite villain to write? I mean, again, you've done stuff
Goblin wise. I'm a Harry guy because because of all those years I spent on spec, working with the Harry Osborn Green Goblin. The thing that always appealed to me most about the Harry version of the Goblin is he was deeply troubled like his dad, but much more sympathetic because we kind of have been with Harry. We've watched everything he's gone through. So he's a character that we're really sympathetic with. At the same time, he's also Peter's best friend. So from a writing point of view, when you have 2 guys who are best friends, who love each other, and yet they're in a position where they're mortal enemies, the story kind of writes itself. All the emotional and psychological material you need is there to really, really dig deep and make a story that's going to really grip you. And then, of course, you have the big slam and bang with the Green Goblin and Spider-Man. But it's the same thing what I said before about it's never really Spider-Man. It's always Peter Parker. When Norman becomes the Green Goblin, it's the Green Goblin. When Harry becomes the Green Goblin, it's Harry. So that's that story that I did for 2 years in Spectacular Spider-Man. That was about Peter and Harry, not about Spider-Man and Green Goblin, despite the fact that they were sometimes in their costumes.
And again, it makes it more personal because, all the other guys are just like, oh, I want to kill Spider-Man. And it's like, with Harry and Peter, they have all this history. And so it's
it really
inconsequential, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have a favorite era, like the 90s stuff where you worked, or is like going back to like the Stan era here? Or?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's my writer brain and then there's my reader brain,
Mm-hmm.
My reader brain will go back to the era when I really discovered Spider-Man, which was the very beginning of the John Romita Sr. era. I was in junior high school. And that first year or so of Romita Sr. is like just classic. But then you go back and you look at all the Ditko stuff, and Ditko and Stan really created that template. And that stuff is brilliant. And so, just it's sort of like with music, what's that song I loved when I was in high school? And that song kind of stays with you in a way. It's the same thing with comics. What's that moment when I discovered Spider-Man? That's always going to be, there's that first Green Goblin story which is Romita's first story, which is, I don't know, 39 and 40 or something of Amazing Spider-Man, where Norman is first revealed as the Goblin. And it has that incredible cover, one of my favorite comic book covers of all time, of the Green Goblin pulling not Spider-Man, but Peter Parker. And you see the Spider-Man emblem underneath his shirt. And I remember it was before I'd actually started reading Spider-Man. And in Brooklyn, we used to get our comics at the local candy store, and there'd be a comic rack in the back. And I remember, seeing that cover, and I had never seen a comic book cover like that before. Wait a minute, it's like, and the hero is not the hero; he's just this kid. And what is that? And the next month was when I started reading Spider-Man for the first time, and went back and found a back issue and read that first part, and I just fell in love with that story. So it's actually kind of funny in retrospect that I've done all this Green Goblin related stuff over the years, because the first Spider-Man story that imprinted on me was the Green Goblin.
Oh yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, again, middle school, high school for me was the '90s stuff, all the Peter and Harry stuff, the Clone Saga. So I get it. That's why I love it so much.
It stays with us, and it's funny because if you remember, after the Clone Saga, the regime at Marvel at that time wanted to just bury it.
Oh, they even mentioned the word clone, right?
Yeah, and then over the years, all these elements have come back, all these characters have come back, and they were, Ben Reilly was a great character, Kane was a great character, and now we can say that Spider-Side was a great character. There's a lot of great elements in those stories, and I'm happy to see them make their way back.
Do you think more and more, because it seemed like back in the day, maybe like readers would age out, but it's like now readers are starting to stay around longer?
I think so. I think that's what happens is, well, that's like, working with my editor, with Danny Chasm. He's like, that was his era, the era of the 90s. He knows more about that stuff than I do, because he was a fan reading all that stuff. And so now he's an adult and he's working at Marvel. So, what is he doing? He wants, he's trying to get those stories out there from that era with that flavor. And so at the time, maybe there was a group of readers that didn't like that stuff, but the kids that were, say, your age reading it as adults look back and go, those are great stories. Oh, I love those stories, because that's where they discovered this stuff. I've always said the problem with the Clone Saga wasn't the story itself, it was that it went on so very long.
Past its best by date, yeah.
It
it's
really,
funny that
really
you bring up love. You staunchly say in this issue that Peter really feels that Norman loved Harry, and I think that's important to put out there, because that is a very difficult relationship, Norman and Harry.
Yeah,
and all kinds.
You
of
can
things,
love. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Norman, although even then Peter's questioning it at the same time that he says it, because I think Norman did love Harry, but I don't think Norman knows how to love.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? In his own, like, I imagine Norman's brain like a bunch of pipes just twisted in a million directions, and by the time that there's a sincere feeling down here in his gut, by the time it comes out through those pipes, it is so twisted. He didn't get love as a child. He doesn't know how to love now. But there is love there. So there are those moments when he really, really does profoundly care, but he doesn't really know how to show it. Just like, in the scene in the book, without giving too much away, where Harry, the Proto-Goblin, is kidnapping Harry, Spider-Man stops him, Norman shows up, and he's profoundly relieved that Harry's okay. And then the next second, he's just a bastard to him, because that's all he knows. That's all he knows how to do. And he probably thinks he's helping Harry by being that way. He's making him stronger,
Yeah, that's what I figured. It's just that cycle of abuse, because because
exactly.
I think at the love, and then the Harry,
and we get into that later in the story. Elements of Norman's childhood and how it feeds into all this, and then we get to explore I don't want to give away the ending, but
I was going to say that figure.
Well, that part I don't even want to say in case anyone hasn't read it yet. But whoever shows up in the last panel, it's an important part of the story that allows us to dig very, very deeply into the Osborne mythology.
So I was going to say I assume that character is going to be a big part of the remaining issues. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, in a lot of ways, the driving force behind it all. Yeah.
Because they've mentioned that character a few times, but I don't think anyone's really dug into that character.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. We can't even discuss it without giving anything away, you know?
Yeah. I feel like I keep interrupting you, Lilith. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
Go for it.
I swear I had a question on tip of my tongue and I can't remember. Yeah, so you can't even hint at the next miniseries coming up here.
No, not so much as a hint. Only that I think it will be unexpected. How about that?
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say how much. Well, are you already working on that? Like, how much lead time do you now?
No. We're just. I will probably start it next month.
Okay, because I didn't know how much lead time they gave.
And it probably won't be out till the end of the year or next year. You know.
Oh, okay. So it's that far in the future. Okay.
So yeah, but you know what? Somehow, no matter how far in the future it is, somehow something always happens that the lead time always shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. Well, here right now, I just finished. We're working plot first style, so on the current series. So I just finished doing the script for the 3rd issue, and the plot for the 4th issue is all done. So that's where we are now with the 1st issue out. So that'll give you an idea. And Michael is wrapping up the artwork on the 3rd issue right now. So we're a couple of months ahead. In an ideal world, you want to be farther ahead than that, but it tends to work out. In the digital age, things can move more quickly too than in the days when things had to get sent around by mail. Mail the pencils to the inker. Mail these pages to the writer so he can dialogue them all that. Now it's like things happen like this.
I mean, so modern technology makes your job much easier then.
Yeah. One of my favorite things is to click open an email and find the artwork there, and just I always say that's the thing more than anything that reduces me to like a 10-year-old comic book fan again, because there's just something. The story's in my head, right? But then there's this art, and it's alive on the page, and it's Spider-Man. It's like it reduces me to a child again, and it's a really wonderful feeling. And that's one of the reasons why I keep doing this, because I can still connect to that feeling. And it's still, like I was saying to somebody the other day, I don't take it for granted that right now I'm writing a Spider-Man story and a Batman story at the same time. What a fantastic thing. 10-year-old me would faint if he knew that this is what I was doing, So I think if, you can get jaded sometimes. You have to keep the 10-year-old in your head alive so you don't get jaded. And so for me, I'm thrilled that I'm doing Spider-Man and Batman at the same time.
Oh yeah, and then a few weeks ago they mentioned I guess they're reprinting a lot of those Marvel DC crossovers, and
yes,
you have a place in history because you are the only person. I mean, there was 2 or so, but
you did 2 of them. Yeah, Spider-Man.
You're the only person to have written Spider-Man teaming up with Batman.
Yeah, I know. I did one for Marvel and one for DC, and they're both in this collection. So I'm very, very excited. Plus, there was one tiny but important coloring error that was made back in the 90s that's bugged me for all these years, and they fixed it. I'm so happy that they fixed it. So it's going to be great to see both those stories back in print. That was, sometimes also, you get a gig and it's the next gig and you're in it and you're working and you're doing your best. And it's not till later when I took a half step back and went, I got to do Spider-Man and Batman teaming up twice for both companies. Again,
you're the guy who did that ever.
Yeah. And so again, the little 10-year-old is like, what? He's just thrilled. So yeah, I'm really happy those are back in print. There's so many of those team up stories are great.
Oh
across the board. Yeah.
So they don't do those anymore. Is that just the business end of?
I think for, and again, this is just, I know as much as you. I think for some years there was maybe the people that were running each company were not maybe getting along in a way that they could have gotten together to do it. I suspect if they're putting these out now, and this is just me, this is no official word, so don't give it any weight beyond that. Maybe this is going to open the door to them doing it again. I would think. I would hope anyway. I would really hope it would be.
I assume if they sell very well, which they probably will, then they're going to be like, well, walk away from that kind of money. Yeah. Which, I mean, I always thought those would be a license to print money, because it's just, you know, even people who probably aren't reading on a regular basis are like, oh, well, Spider-Man's teaming up with Batman. I got to read that.
Yeah. Or what was the first one they did years ago? Was
Spider-Man, Superman.
Superman. Yeah. I can't imagine what that must have sold. And it was a big tabloid, wasn't it? I think when it came out. Yeah.
I think, and that was the very first one. It had never been done before. So I'm sure.
Yeah. So I cannot imagine that must have just sold through the roof. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a no-brainer, especially if you're teaming up these truly iconic characters. It's a word that gets overused, but when you talk about Batman and Spider-Man, they are truly iconic characters. People that normally probably wouldn't even read comics would want to read that story.
Is there a dream team up you would love to write? Like, I mean, you already did Spider-Man and Batman, but like two characters from each side, or two teams from each side, would you like to write?
He already did the perfect one. It's called Scooby Apocalypse. I'm a huge fan of the Batman and Scooby-Doo like stuff. So
I'd like to see a Scooby Apocalypse omnibus, actually, but that's not the answer to this question. Let me think if there's another team up. You know, that's a really good question. You know, and this is not the stuff that they would go to because it's not the most commercial, but I love all the supernatural characters, you know? So I would love to see Doctor Strange and Dr. Fate, or, you know, Doctor Strange and Constantine. Something like that would be a really, really cool story. And then you can really bring in all those other characters, the Demon and Swamp Thing and all the Man Thing. And how about that? That'll be the bestseller, right? Man Thing, Swamp Thing, the DC Marvel crossover that nobody asked for, that I would love to write.
Sometimes those are the best and surprise people, though, honestly.
Yeah, I think so, but I don't think that's where they would go. They're going to go.
Plus, maybe if you just make it like a huge, like all the supernatural characters on both sides.
Yeah, if it was a big
Spider in there,
use them all. Yeah, if you use them all, that would be a lot of fun. I would write that in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you love Dr. Fate, but it's one of your favorite characters.
Yeah, and Doctor Strange as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you like the mist. Yes, yeah.
I love the mystical / supernatural characters. I do. I love them. I wrote Justice League Dark for a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, toward the end of the previous run. It was just great because you could pull in any of those characters that you wanted, and that type of story allows you to get more into the metaphysical / spiritual cosmic spaces, you know, and I love those kind of stories.
I like it. Me and my other co-host Will were talking, because we covered it a while ago. Like your Hal Jordan Spectre series, we love that series. It's like that's never been reprinted. It's not.
I know. Yeah, that would love. I would love to see that. That was you get it. It happened with both Dr. Fate and Spectre at DC. Sometimes you get an opportunity with these characters that are pre-existing, you know, company-owned characters, but you're given the freedom to tell stories as if they're creator-owned books. So on both those series, I was always able to really, if you read the Spectre, you will really get a sense of everything that I personally was going through, thinking, and feeling at the point in time that I wrote that. I poured everything that I was in that moment into that series. And because of what it afforded me, being a story that had these spiritual and cosmic dimensions, I could really, really, you know, dive deep into it. So I would love to see the Spectre reprinted. I'd love to see that whole Dr. Fate run reprinted. Someone some years ago was kind enough at a convention. They gifted me. They'd made a collection of Dr. Fate. You know, those companies that'll do it for you. You know, and they made this beautiful, beautiful hardcover and gave it to me, which is sitting on my shelf over there. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. Is that just like a certain eras that they haven't reprinted, that like a lot of your 90s Spider-Man stuff? I mean, that's like the series from the 2000s.
Yeah. You never know what the thinking is, and then all of a sudden the stuff appears. And sometimes they reprint stuff that I'm like, why did you reprint that? I didn't ever want to see that story again, you know. And the Spidey stuff I've been waiting for. But I have hopes that it's coming.
Yeah, because I think sometimes they reprint stuff like if a character shows up like in live media or something like that. But
Yeah.
it's like Spider-Man's a no-brainer. When is Spider-Man not popular?
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I have an omnibus of that entire spectacular Spider-Man run that was done in Poland. I have collections from Italy, from South America. You know what I mean? So it's been done. So so the files are out there; they exist, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we see it coming.
Again, especially if these miniseries are selling well. Especially,
Yeah,
it's just so
yeah,
many of these '90s ones they're doing.
yeah. And you know, the first story that we did in Spectacular Spider-Man involved Vermin and was sort of
Yes.
a sequel to Craven's Last Hunt as well. You know, they could have taken The Child Within and put it in one of those big Craven collections. Would have been a nice pairing there as well.
Oh yeah, I think we've discussed that before. Yeah, just make a big collection, especially with that Craven movie coming. This year, right?
Yeah, supposed to come last year, but I guess they booted it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's maybe towards the end of this year. So yeah, I mean, again, we'll get Craven's Last Hunt reprinted for the 500th time, and then
Which is great, and I'm very grateful that they keep reprinting it, because they keep reprinting it, and new people all the time are reading it for the first time, which is always a delight to me, you know, because that's what you hope for, to have a story that lasts that long and that you're finding new readers. And the second part that I'm grateful for is that then they send me a royalty check, which is delightful. You know? that story has really, you know, done well for me over the years.
And you say, I mean, didn't you say you didn't think that was going to be that big, but it actually did.
You know, no one in their right mind is working on a story thinking this is going to be great and people will be reading it 30 years from now. If you think that, you're crazy or a genius, most likely crazy. You know, and not to mention arrogant. You know, you know, you're working on a story, you're doing your best, they put it out, oh, people like it. That's that. And back then, things weren't even being collected all the time either. So the fact that that was collected in a nice hardcover, then a paperback, all that right there, you know, right not long after it came out, was a big deal at the time. It was a really big deal because that stuff was still kind of new to have a high-end hardcover, you know, like that. And then to look back and see it, you know, how many editions of this I have sitting on the shelf behind me. It's fantastic. I'm incredibly grateful.
Well, that was also one of the first, isn't that one of the first where they're like, okay, we'll jump this story from Amazing Spider-Man to Spectacular Spider-Man, the Web of Spider-Man, and that,
Yeah, it wasn't one of the first; it was the first. That was, and that was Jim Salicrup, the editor. That was his idea, and it was a brilliant idea that everyone's been doing ever since.
Oh yeah, I mean, all of them, both sides, Marvel and DC. I mean, Spider-Man, Batman, Superman.
Yeah. But it had never been done before. And Jim's thinking, and it was right, was like, we have a story where in the first issue, Spider-Man is apparently killed and buried. Well, if the same month over in Amazing Spider-Man, he's fighting Dr. Octopus, it kills the reality.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the one that said, let's just run this 6-parter through all 3 books in 2 months. Great idea. Great idea.
All right, Lilith, do you have any other questions for this man?
No, not at all.
Okay, so, and I always feel like I'm forgetting something. So are you working on anything else besides this, besides the upcoming Robin Lives?
I have, well, last year we did a Kickstarter for the DeMatteis, which was me launching 4 new series with 4 wonderful artists. The idea then was that the people that supported the Kickstarter, which was a great success, they would vote to see which of the 4 new series would continue. Well, the vote came in, and what got the most votes was please continue all 4. So coming up probably in May, possibly June, we're going to launch the next Kickstarter. We're all hard at work on the second issues of all 4 series, and that's coming up. That's really exciting. And you can still get the first issues if you go over to spellboundcomics.com. And people that want to, we did a beautiful collected edition with all kinds of extras, and I wrote introductions for every story, and so check that out, and then come along with us on the new Kickstarter. In fact, I wouldn't mind once we launch the Kickstarter coming back and flogging it a little bit on your show, because for that month when that Kickstarter is running, it's a lot of work, and you really have, the main job is to raise awareness that it even exists. Sometimes, I saw the last time you can spend a whole month and thinking, oh my God, people are so sick of me talking about this. And a month goes by and someone goes, I didn't know you had a Kickstarter. Plus what I learned is you could be posting about it on social media at 1:00. By 1:15, there's a whole different group of people out there that never saw that post from 1:00. So you really have to stay on top of it. It's hard work, but it's really gratifying. And for me, like I said, getting any new idea out into the world is a great thing, but to get 4 out into the world simultaneously and be working with great artists like Sean McManus and Tom Mandrake and David Baldion and Matthew Dow Smith and all these people, amazing, plus all the people that did, we have got some great alternate covers lined up, some amazing artists. I mean, it's very excited about the second launch. So that's coming. And I don't know if we've ever talked about them, but the past couple of years, I put out 2 novellas. One is called The Excavator. The other one is called The Witness. You can get them both on Amazon. And I'm working on a 3rd novella now, which should be out sometime later this year. I'm also working on an animation thing that I would love to tell you about because I think you'd be very excited, but I can't say a word.
Oh.
I'll just tease it. I'll just tease it. So yeah, it's really busy.
Okay.
I'm really busy right now, and I'm always happier when I'm busy like this. I have a lot to do.
I mean, we've talked to you a few times, and every time you're very busy. So, I mean, that is what I wanted to ask you. So do you ever do you set boundaries or rules for yourself where you're like, okay, I'm only going to write a certain amount of hours per day, or, from this time to this time, or...
When my kids were younger and I had very definitive boundaries, like take my daughter to school, pick her up at 3:00, take her to ballet, so I knew I had those hours in between. And as my kids aged up and moved out, suddenly the boundaries got softer, So I just kind of go with the flow with my work. Sometimes I may start working have breakfast and I'm working right away and I could be done by the early afternoon. Or I could not start till the afternoon, or sometimes I get a bunch of work done in the morning. And then a little later in the day, it's like, let me just take a look at that and start to change it. Next thing I know, we're off again, So I've never, aside from the boundaries created by like having children, I'm very intuitive about that, about how I work. And, the best motivator is the deadline. The work has to be in, the work will always get done, and it'll get done in time. It's just because I've been doing it for a long time. I'm a professional. There are always rare occasions where something comes up, but 95% of the time, if not 98% of the time, you'll get the work and it'll be in on time. But I just follow the story. I follow the characters. And sometimes, like I said, I may think I'm just going to work for an hour or two right now. And it happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was actually working on this animation thing. And I had a big chunk of it, dude. And I thought, well, I'll start it today. I'll work on it tomorrow and the next day. And I looked up, I'd been sitting in the same place for like 7 hours or whatever it was, and I got it all done. So you never know. It's my engagement with the story that leads me on into how much I'm doing that day. Now you do, as a freelancer, have to know when to say no. Like it's very tempting to, they called and they want me to do this. But if you look at your schedule and you see there's no way you're going to fit that in, or if you do, something's going to suffer, you can't say yes to that. Much as you want to, you can't. And that's always hard, because sometimes really great projects come up and you just don't have the time to do them. And the funny thing is, a month later, you might have the time, but a month later, they don't need it. So it's you're always balancing those things. But the great thing about being a freelancer is really no one knows when, how, what, or why when it comes to how you're working, and they don't care. They want a good story and they want it in on time. So if I might be doing nothing on a Wednesday and working on Sunday because that's the way the week worked out. I don't have to abide by 9 to 5 rules, and that's great. I've been a freelancer all my life. I got to be here while my kids were growing up and be at home and be with them and really be an active part of their lives, in a way that someone who has to go out and get on the train for an hour and then get to work and work for 8 hours, take a train and come home, doesn't get to do. So being a freelancer is also a very difficult thing, because you're not in control of what's going to happen. None of us really are, but being a freelancer really underscores it, And I've always said I've had years when I've done better than I ever dreamed I could ever do in my life, financially, everything else. And then you have years where it's like, oh my God, are they going to take the house away? And you never know. That's just the nature of the beast when you're a freelancer. But I wouldn't trade any of it, because A, I've gotten to just do work that I love, and B, just the fact that I got to be here for my kids. It's incredible. Can't put a price on that, you know. Just incredible. I wouldn't trade the worst of the days that I've had for anything, you know.
Yeah, I was just curious about your schedule because it seems like every time we talk to you, you're juggling at least 3 or 4 things.
Yeah, and you know, you focus. I don't. You know, there were times in the past where I'd be able, sometimes in the same day, I'm going to write 5 pages of this one and 5 pages of that one. I don't do that anymore. You know, I focus on one thing, I get it done, and I move on to the next thing. Now, I may be writing one thing and just putting together some notes for the next thing. So, you know, that's really for me, the most fun part of the job is just when the ideas start coming. It's like a little door opens in the back of your head. It's just yesterday, you know, we're talking about this next Spider-Man thing I'm going to do. All of a sudden, oh, I could do that. You know, get that all down really, really fast because it's like this door opens and these ideas come flowing out. And that's the favorite part of it for me, is just because it's a surprise to me. The unconscious opens the door and starts telling me things that I didn't know. So, and then, you know, the conscious mind comes in and has to craft all that into a story. But it's that burst of idea and creativity, the movie's playing in your mind, that is maybe my favorite part of the whole process.
So is that another thing where you might just be sitting somewhere, you know, maybe you're out somewhere having dinner and you're just like, oh, wait, this idea just popped into my head. I have to write this down,
or at least I have to try to remember this. As my wife will attest, as you know, one of her lines is, "Where'd you just go?" You know? It's just, you know, you're sitting there and all of a sudden it's like, you know, your mouth's hanging open and your eyes glaze over because your mind is someplace else entirely. I've heard stories about Jack Kirby. That's why he never drove. They didn't trust him to drive. I think the story is, I'm going to get it wrong, but I think in general it's a correct story. The one time they let him drive, he had an accident because he was too busy being Jack Kirby and creating universes, you know. Can you imagine walking around with that imagination? Holy Moses, you know. Yeah, so I understand that. I have that feeling of like it's like you enter another dimension, or the other dimension enters you, might be a better way to put it. And I love it. I love it.
But yes, we will definitely have to have you back for round 2 of the Kickstarter stuff. Like, I don't know how I missed the first one. I'm going in there when we're done. I'm getting the
spellboundcomics.com.
Yes.
And yes, when number 2s come out, yes. If I haven't contacted you, you contact me and be like, hey, let's talk about this.
Okay, that'd be great.
We are down. So. Anything else you want to plug? Even websites or?
I think I covered everything.
Cons.
No, you know, I have not done a single convention since before COVID. There's one coming up at the end of the year. I don't know if it's announced yet, so I won't say it, that I'm going to do at the end of the year, but it is in another country. So I figured if I'm going to go back, I'll go big, you know. And hopefully next year I would like to get back to more regular convention going. So, and in terms of social media, you can find me on Twitter. Well, I'm not on Twitter that much anymore, but I'm on Blue Sky and Threads and Facebook and my website, jmdmatteis.com. So I'm out there somewhere floating in the.
Impressive that you keep your website up too, by the way, as frequently as you do with everything you got going on. So.
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting time that we live in where this wall between creator and audience is much thinner than it ever was. So you can connect with your audience in a really, really deep and interesting way. It used to be, right? Write a letter to the comics and hope that somebody reads it. And maybe the guy that wrote the story or drew the story gets to see your letter. And now, you know, someone on social media can say, oh, I love that story. What about da-da-da? And we can have a conversation about it in real time. And it's a really sweet thing. And I found over the years that despite the fact that the social media landscape can be very, very ugly at times, 99% of my interactions over the years have been really, really nice with really nice people, you know, appreciative, kind people. So I really enjoy that.
Thank goodness. Yeah, I think the good outweighs the bad. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes
and then
it's a louder voice. Yeah.
Yeah. And that louder voice comes along, you hit the block button, and that's that. Yes. You know. Anyway, so any last questions or?
No, I think we're good. But yes, we
Okay.
we must talk the Kickstarter when it comes out. Heck, I might even reach out when that the Robin Lives comes out. So.
Oh, sure, sure, absolutely. That'll be out in July, like I said. All right, great. Well, it's great to talk to you guys again.
Thank you, sir. Again, thank you for sharing your precious time because, again, you're always working on many things at
Well,
once.
we've done this so many times, it's like a reunion at this point, when we talk.
But yes, thank you. Again, we appreciate the time because, again, I know how busy you are.
But happy to do it. Happy to do it.
All right, so yes, J.M. DeMatteis, go pick up Spider-Man Shadow of the Green Goblin. 1's in stores now, 2 will be out soon. So
May 8th, right? I think is the next one.
You know better than I.
that sounds about
That's what it
right,
said
man.
in the back of the book. So
Okay, good. Then it must be true.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.